Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bohannic, and today I'm bringing back an interview from this podcast's first year with Lauren Ornelas of the Food Empowerment Project. Lauren was on the show in 2020. It was our 11th episode, and now 5 years later and over 100 episodes later, I want to revive some of the old interviews, give them some new life as they were back when my audio editing wasn't quite as polished as it is now. So it's nice to give them a refresher. And Lauren will be coming up from California and speaking at our upcoming Eugene VeganFest on May 4th. And I'm so grateful that she is going to be joining us. So I reviewed this interview and it still has wonderful information, relevant information about her amazing and unique organization, Food Empowerment Project. The Food Empowerment Project, it brings together vegan, animal, and human rights issues like farm worker rights and food deserts, access to produce and healthy foods, child and slave labor in chocolate production, and more. And we talk about other projects that they have going in the interview as well. Lauren and I go way back. We were doing activism together, street activism and protests back in the 1990s together. And Lauren's educated me on so many issues over the years. And the chocolate issue is one that I actually incorporate into all of my compassionate living events. We have a policy for my veg fests and other events that vendors can only use chocolate that is on Food Empowerment Project's approved list that's free of child and slave labor. And we'll talk more about that in the interview. I believe very much that we need to look at veganism in the larger framework of systematic violence against everyone on this planet. We can't dismantle one without seeing how systems of structural violence are all connected. And as Lauren states so beautifully in this interview, oppression is a singular thread. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. I did have to cut some of the interview because we talked about COVID. Of course, it was 2020, but we also talk a bit about Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement, because it was very timely in the moment. And I kept some of that because it still resonates. Okay, we're going to have a brief word from Lantern Publishing and Media, and then we'll get into the interview on the other side.
Hello, everyone. I am Louisa, one of the hosts of Lantern Voices, a new podcast by Lantern Publishing and Media. Lantern Publishing and Media is a nonprofit book publisher. Our mission is to publish books that promote a better, more compassionate world for all animals. We are the proud publishers of The Humane Hoax by Hope Bohannic, Sister Vegan by Breeze Harper, How to End Injustice Everywhere by Melanie Joy, among many other authors that develop amazing works on behalf of our planet and non-human animals. Join us every other week for interviews with our authors, activists, and people that are fighting for a more compassionate world. Follow Lantern Voices at your favorite podcast platform and keep up with the latest news about our podcasts and our books by following Lantern PM on Instagram.
Okay, so I want to bring in our speaker now. I'm so honored to have Lauren Ornelas here with us on the podcast today. Lauren is the founder of Food Empowerment Project. She was the executive director for many years. Lauren has been active in the animal rights movement for more than 30 years, and I can personally attest to that as we did activism together back in the 90s. We're both from Sonoma County, California, and have stood side by side at many a protest. She is the former executive director of Viva USA. She also served as the campaigns director with Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition for 6 years. She has achieved wins for the animals through the decades with campaigns against Trader Joe's and Whole Foods Market and Pier 1 Imports and others. She even helped halt the construction of an industrial dairy operation in California. She also has a TED Talk that you should definitely check out, and I will have a link to that in the show notes. So welcome to the podcast, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me, Hope. And I'm surprised you didn't mention we got arrested together.
That's right. We sure did. You're welcome to tell the story if you'd like. We had many adventures back in the 90s for sure.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. It's great to have you and great to talk to you. Why don't we start by you just telling us your story about yourself, your activism journey? When and why did you go vegan? How did you get into activism? What's Lauren's story?
Well, I will try to sum up Lauren's story as much as I can. But I actually am from Texas. I grew up in San Antonio, and my parents got divorced when I was about 4. And I was in elementary school. My mom told me that the chicken I was eating was a chicken. And I decided I didn't want to eat animals anymore. And this is in hindsight, I realized that one of the reasons why I probably was becoming so attached to the idea of not wanting to hurt animals was the fact that, my parents got a divorce when I was young. Therefore, I pretty much was having to be taken care of by different people, being separated from my mom and my sisters. And I think when I look back, of course, I think that that must have been my start to a realization that I didn't want to separate families. I didn't want to hurt anybody's family. So, I went vegetarian in elementary school, but I wasn't able to stick with it because my family didn't have a lot of money. And eventually, I just had to eat what people gave us. And so I went back to eating animals. And in high school, I decided when I was 16 that I was going to go vegetarian and didn't care if I ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, but I didn't want to eat animals anymore. And by the time I was 17, this was in 1987, I got interested in animal rights. And by 18 in 1988, I decided to go vegan for the animals. And during this time, I had also been involved in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. And as being a very proud Chicana, being Mexican, I was also raised with an understanding of the Great Boycott and what was taking place for farm workers. So, but being in high school at the time, I was against the war, I was against the death penalty, but so many of these issues were things that I couldn't really do a whole lot on. And so I decided to focus all my time and energy on animal rights because this is something I could decide in buying what cosmetics I bought, what I ate, everything like that. And so I really just dedicated my life to the animal rights movement. I started the first animal rights group for a high school in Texas. I had a university group and eventually started an animal rights group in Austin, Texas called Action for Animals. Then started working for the national animal rights organizations as well as doing grassroots activism. And during this time, I was starting to get a lot of pushback from animal rights activists when I would talk about human rights issues. During this time, I learned about what was happening for chocolate in Western Africa. And there was going to be a boycott against strawberries. And so I started to talk about these issues while running Viva USA and just trying to get animal rights people to understand that there are other food justice issues going on. And I got a lot of pushback from the animal rights movement saying that I was hurting the animals by talking about these other issues. And so I was kind of at a loss as to what to do because I felt like I didn't want to separate these issues. I found that they were both important and I wanted to elevate both of them. And it wasn't until I went to speak at the World Social Forum in Caracas, Venezuela in 2006 that I really felt empowered by all the people that I was around. I went there to speak about corporate animal ag and how it impacts animals, workers, and the environment. But there were so many people at this event who looked like me, who were talking about worker issues and the environment and just everything. And so that was kind of the beginnings of Food Empowerment Project.
So you founded Food Empowerment Project in 2007. What inspired you to start the project? I know you talked a little about that, but I'd love to hear more about that interconnection with food justice issues and worker issues. And I mean, it's such a wonderful intersection of social issues with the veganism and animal rights. And I'd love to hear more because it's just such an important project.
Thanks. Yeah, sure. So, when I started Food Empowerment Project, I actually had a full-time job working for an environmental justice organization. So when I started Food Empowerment Project, I was like filled to the brim with all of the worker issues that I wanted to talk about. And I had to figure out a way to, narrow the focus. And food seemed the right way to do it, because obviously that included non-human animals. And it's something that those of us that have the privilege do several times a day. We eat. And so we have the opportunity to make a difference with our food choices. And so, I kind of brought back for me, obviously trying to get people to go vegan to lessen the suffering of non-human animals is absolutely critical. But in doing so, we're therefore then encouraging people to consume more produce. And those are two things I can't disconnect anymore. It's impossible for me now to talk to people about going vegan and not wanting to talk about what happens to farm workers as well. So those two issues really lead one into the other. So that was pretty easily done. And then I actually lived in San Jose for a while in California, and I lived across the street from two liquor stores, and I worked across the street from two liquor stores. And the idea of lack of access to healthy foods was just starting to come to the forefront. And I realized that when we talk about veganism again, and not wanting to cause harm to non-human animals, that not everybody has that right to choose, because they are living in communities where they don't even have that access to healthy foods. And so I felt it was really important to take a look at the lack of access to healthy foods. One, because it's an injustice that's taking place. Two, it is impacting people's ability to go vegan. But more than anything, it's just really trying to show people the various ways that our world is connected. It's connected in terms of who puts it on our table and how they're treated. And the various ways in which we need to look at oppression as a singular thread, that when we look at food is kind of woven together. And so oppression and exploitation are very much part of the food system. Food Empowerment Project's work is really about making connections. We're here to help inform people about what's taking place in the food industry, but also give people tools in order to make a difference. As a Chicana, I feel that many of the things that those of us who are Black and Brown and Indigenous, we've lived through in our lives, to where we can't piece apart different things, that it's all connected for us. And so when starting Food Empowerment Project, there was no way I could do any different but keep everything and show how things are connected.
Something that I've learned from you and your work is, I used to often say in, vegan talks and when we give presentations, oh, going vegan's so easy. It's so easy. Anyone can do it. And I think it's something that we had in our toolbox that we used to always say as vegans, but it's not that way for every community. It's not that way for everyone. There are food deserts. There are as low income people that are unable really to have access to fresh produce and to, vegan alternative foods. So I now have changed the way I speak about that, because I'm much more aware that it's not just so easy for everyone.
Yes, and thank you for listening, Hope. I mean, exactly. I think that for so long, we just wanting people to go vegan, that we're like, it's so easy, it's so easy. And I think that we never realized, because I'm sure I've said that as well, that how we might have sounded to other people who have different lived experiences that we did, who knew better and who knew that wasn't true, and that possibly eroded our credibility with them. So yeah, Food Empowerment Project, we work on lack of access to healthy food, or food apartheid, where Black and Brown and Indigenous communities do not have the same access to fresh fruits and vegetables, as well as meat and dairy alternatives. And we do this work in a variety of ways. We follow environmental justice principles, so we only go into communities when we're asked to. And we make an assessment of the community, where we physically go in and we survey for fresh, frozen, canned fruits and vegetables, as well as meat and dairy alternatives. And we, put out a report on that community and the availability of it in the higher income areas and in the lower income communities. And after we do that, we then put out focus groups. Depending on the community, we make sure that our focus groups represent the community appropriately. So in one community, we had 3 focus groups in San Jose that were all conducted in Spanish. In Vallejo, California, we did 7 focus groups to make sure we captured the Black, Filipinx community members, the seniors, as well as we conducted one of those in Spanish. So to make sure what the community is experiencing, as barriers, as well as what some of the solutions might be. One of the reasons, obviously, we're doing this work is because access to healthy food should be a right and not a privilege. And in the United States and in other Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, that's not the case. And so our work is really just trying to take a look at it, make sure that, we help right a wrong that's taking place, but also is to acknowledge that for those people who want to go vegan, it may be difficult to impossible for them to do so. And they should have a right to if they want to. And recognizing as well that the fact in these communities that this food is not available to them increases dietary diseases. So we know diets higher in fruits and vegetables is better for your health. And for these communities to not be having that access means that their health is going to be in a decline. But also importantly is the fact that things like dairy alternatives being not available is very problematic. Many people call those of us who can't digest cow's milk lactose intolerant, but at Food Empowerment Project, we call that lactose normal. Because first of all, how is it normal for anybody to consume cow's milk into adulthood, or goat milk for that matter? But also that too many times the onus is put on Black and Brown and Indigenous people that something's wrong with us when there's not. Colonization is what brought milk to many of our lands, my ancestors especially. So, to not have these dairy alternatives available for those of us who are lactose normal means that what is actually available to us is bad for our health.
I love that. Lactose normal. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're the only animal on earth that drink another animal's milk and drink milk after infancy. It's not normal or natural. So I love that. Lactose normal. Absolutely. So, Food Empowerment Project has a really unique campaign that exposes child slave labor in the chocolate industry. And many vegans think that, chocolate that's dairy free is cruelty free. But as you have educated me on this issue, and I now buy only slave free chocolate on a personal level, and I also try my best to only have slave free chocolate at my events. And I encourage other organizers to do that as well. So please tell us about this issue. How are the children used and abused by the chocolate industry? And what can we do to help?
Thank you, Hope, for making sure that you're eating your ethics and not buying chocolate from slavery and child labor, and making sure that the events that you organize don't as well, because consistency is what matters. So what's happening right now is that in different parts of the world, primarily Western Africa and Brazil, child labor and slavery is taking place for the chocolate industry. You have millions of children in Western Africa who are victims of the worst forms of child labor, including slavery, working in the cacao industry. Children as young as 7 years old holding heavy machetes trying to cut cacao pods out of the trees. Young children who are being forced to carry 40-pound bags of cacao pods. They're beaten if they don't move fast enough. Some of these children are locked in overnight and they're beaten if they try to escape. And all of this for chocolate. In Brazil, which is now just starting to show some of these same problems, you have slavery taking place as well. And this is not a good sign, hoping that Brazil tries to deal with this issue immediately so things don't become as bad as they are in Western Africa. And, you have children in Western Africa in 2018 who were sold into slavery for like $10 each. So this is a huge problem that's taking place primarily because these farmers aren't being paid what they should be by these multi-billion-dollar chocolate companies. We have a list of chocolates we do and do not recommend on our website. It's broken down into the different categories so you can see why we don't recommend particular companies. We also have free apps that people can download for their Android or their iPhone. And we update this list every month. And every company has to make at least one vegan chocolate to make our list. And if there's a company that you love that is not on our list, reach out to us. We'll be happy to contact them. And if there's a company that you love that is not recommended on our list, on our app, you're able to reach out to that company and ask them to do better.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love your app and I highly recommend it to people. I use it when shopping. So if you're, in the chocolate aisle and there's a new brand of chocolate you're not familiar with and you're excited about, you can check it out on the list and see if it is recommended or not. So I really appreciate that so much.
Thank you. Thanks for using it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so, I think, critical to look at the broader picture here and see that, it's not only the animals suffering, that these children are suffering too. I mean, I heard stories of, from your website that children were like kind of coerced with like promises of bikes and things like that that children would love, or toys, and then they're promised these things and whisked away saying that, oh, we'll get you a bike, and they're taken from their families. I mean, it's not orphans. I'm sure some are orphans, but I mean, not that that should matter, but still, it's horrible.
Yeah, a
um
lot of them are taken. I mean, a lot of them also come from very poor families that they think they're going to be going into work, and just being able to send the money back to their families, and they never see their children again. But yeah, some are trafficked hundreds of miles away where they're going to. They don't even speak their local dialect.
mm,
Some slaves have obviously escaped, and that's how we know what's been happening.
wow, it's awful. Well, thank you so much for doing this work and for making these connections and, showing us that there's a lot of places where we can make a difference. And we're already, as vegans, used to avoiding products. So this is just, another tool in our wheelhouse that we can make a difference. So I appreciate the work you do on this so much.
Thanks. Yeah, I always say that as vegans, we're kind of already equipped for this. We're already thinking about these things. We're already reading labels. We're already, so we are the best position to make a difference on all these other issues as well.
So I know that Food Empowerment Project has a new effort called Fight for the Ocean. And I love it when we get to talk about fish. They're really the forgotten food animal. So I want to hear all about this campaign and how it's going.
Fight for the Ocean is was created in honor of Dr. Sylvia Earle. Basically, our goal is to remind people that even though we're vegan and we're doing all that we can for the ocean by not consuming the creatures in her, we all have to do a little bit more because the ocean is dying. So we coordinate ocean cleanups around the world where people go out and they pick up trash like any other group would do, but we're also talking about veganism, and the information cards that we hand out are also talking about not consuming animals. So another part of the work that we're doing is trying to get people to understand, you've seen it all, we've all seen it, where you have people who see animals such as dolphins or sea turtles caught up in nets, and people are pained by it. Then somebody goes in and they cut the nets and they rescue them, and then everybody's so happy about what's just taken place. But these people still consume sea creatures, and they don't recognize that those nets are only in those oceans because of their consumption of sea creatures. So what we're going to try to do is try to bridge this gap with conservationists and veganism to show people that, we're looking at vegans and we're saying, yes, we all must do more. Let's go and do those ocean cleanups. But we also want to look at the conservationists out there and say, thanks for doing everything you're doing. But please don't forget that by consuming creatures from the ocean, you are contributing to their death as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And those nets, people don't realize, but all those nets are made of nylon, which is plastic. So, I think people think that those nets are cotton or something and will just biodegrade, but they're not. They're all made of plastic now, and they just continue to float in the ocean after, if a fisherman has a rip in one of his nets or something, he doesn't responsibly haul it in to land and then put it in the land. No, of course, it's just going to get thrown into the ocean. I think it's called ghost nets.
Yep, those nets.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where,
we actually had one donated to us, which I cut apart to use as information, to show people and they can feel it for themselves and know what it's made out of. But we still had like 100 feet of it. And so I reached out to everybody I could to find out what can we do with this net. And there was nothing, because you can't burn it because it's going to be toxic fumes released. You bury it, it's still plastic. It's not going to go anywhere. And
Right.
so one of the suggestions that was given to us was donate it to an artist. And that's what we ended up doing because there was no way to dispose of it in a, environmentally safe way.
Right. And there's so much of it in the ocean, and the marine mammals get caught in it and they drown because they can't surface for oxygen. And yeah, it's just horrible. And yeah, and you're right. They don't make the connection that it's because of fishing, eating fish, that all this ghost netting exists.
That's what's responsible for the destruction. I mean, of course, we're not going to ignore the fact that people should eat fish for the fish's sake either. But we don't want people to feel bad about that compassion that they have. It's great that people are upset by sea turtles being caught in them. We know that is great. That is compassion.
Yeah.
We just wanted them to take that a step further
Yeah.
and recognize that they are unfortunately contributing to that.
I think another aspect of this that I'm sure you know about and are possibly going to incorporate is that we're eating so many fish, so much of the ocean's fish supply, that fish that eat fish are starving.
Right.
So we're taking so much of the resources away from the animals that need them for survival. We don't, but they do.
Right. And you can look up the food chain too. I mean, why are they killing seals and sea lions sometimes? You know, it's because they don't want them eating the fish.
Right. So I'd like to switch focus and talk about something that, of course, is on a lot of people's minds right now with the Black Lives Matter protests that happened, and really the subsequent national reckoning with race issues. How can vegans be better anti-oppression activists? How can we be better allies?
It's a great question. I think that there's a lot that vegans can do and need to do. I would start by first saying that I think that vegans need to learn. I think they need to listen. I think that they need to amplify the voices of Black and Brown and Indigenous vegan and animal rights activists and organizations. Because what's happening is that the animal rights movement has the reputation that it does, with many of whom I feel are our natural allies, partially because the types of campaigns that some organizations have run, but also because the only organizations that seem to get a lot of attention are those run by white people.
Ultimately, if we want to help animals, if we want everyone to go vegan, then you need to embrace everyone. You have to open your arms wide and be able to adjust the message and adjust your thinking and adjust your center of concern to be broader.
Yeah, I mean, we can't expect other people necessarily to widen their circle of compassion if we can't widen our circle of compassion to the some most vulnerable people in our society.
That's
And
right.
I don't mean vulnerable necessarily in a they can't speak for themselves. Black Lives Matter has proved that, but it means that they still don't have the power when white people are the ones who are in charge and making these decisions and punishing them just for the color of their skin.
Really powerful. Thank you, Lauren, so much for all this. So, I want to ask you, what gives you hope?
If you had asked me that a year ago, I wouldn't have known completely what to say. But right now, in the time that we're at, it's absolutely the Black Lives Matter movement. It's the young people. I feel like young people right now, to try to explain to people our age, Hope, about what Food Empowerment Project does, it requires an explanation. To the younger generations, they need no explanation. They already get it. I don't even have to explain to them how these issues are connected. They get it.
Wow.
So it's absolutely what's happening in the world today is giving me hope. It's just scratching the surface, absolutely. But even just taking down the statues of Confederate soldiers, of racists, although that's scratching the surface, we want much more than that, and we deserve much more than that. To imagine myself being in Texas and seeing statues to the people who in my textbook showed killing my people and my ancestors was a great start. This is giving me hope. This is giving me hope that this generation is just not going to take it. And I am so thankful for them. And I'm standing by their side, or I'm standing behind them, or in front of them to protect them, whatever it is that they need me to do. So there's a place for all of us, and we just need to learn to listen and to watch and to support as much as we can. So this change goes much further than just tearing down these statues, that we tear down these systems that have never been made for many of us to succeed in this country.
So I know that some vegans might say, oh, it's just too much to think about my chocolate or the oceans or whatever. I'm already doing so much for veganism or the animal issue that they are focused on. What would you say to that?
I would understand. I mean, I know that going vegan can be a tremendous change in someone's life because it impacts every aspect of it, really, because we eat.
Yeah.
We have the privilege several times a day. So I get that. And I would say that, in the work that we do at Food Empowerment Project, we're not asking anybody to change necessarily what it is that they're doing for non-human animals as much as we're asking them to be more consistent in their ethics. And in fact, what we call eat your ethics. So to make sure that you're not buying chocolate that's supporting slavery and child labor, that you're honoring boycotts called by farm workers themselves, that you're thinking more about your food choices in terms of how it impacts everyone. And so to look at these as opportunities to help make the world a better place and really just to be more consistent. But I don't want anybody ever thinking this is, I can't do all this and not do anything, right? Because that's how we hear vegans, people who we're trying to talk to about going vegan. That's what they say as well. And so this is a way that we can show too that we're willing to grow, and we can open our minds as well to new forms of oppression and adjust our lives accordingly.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think once someone has been vegan, solidly vegan for, a period of time and they feel secure in it, you shouldn't stop there. That shouldn't be the end of it. I mean, there's so much more that we can do. So once you're feeling secure in that, then there's so many other issues that you can incorporate in your life to do better. So, we do need to wrap up soon. How can our listeners get a hold of you and how can they help Food Empowerment Project and further your mission?
Well, we have a website, foodispower.org, and we are on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and people are welcome to reach out to us. We're always happy to have more volunteers help grow our work.
Thank you so much for being with us, Lauren. It was really wonderful to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me, Hope.
And thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can support this podcast by leaving a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also support us by going to hopefortheanimalspodcast.org and signing up on our e-news list or making a donation with the donation button. We appreciate your support so much. And please have hope for a better world for animals and live vegan.